Today, we're going to be breaking down 8 traits of a 5-star wide receiver. So the first trait we're going to be going over is being able to pair your releases together. When you look at the top tier guys, the guys that play at a high level of college football, get recruited to play at a high level of college football, they're very manipulative with their releases by making things look the same. So this is a former 5-star wide receiver here, Brandon Inniss, out of South Florida, and he's going to be showing a great example of a slide crossover release. So this slide release, so what he does to start this release, this first step is called a kick step. That's where you take your back foot, you kick behind your front foot, and you use that to kind of load up your hips so you could throw them to the outside, whether that's you're throwing just a quick jab step or you're doing this type of slide release. Now, why this would be considered pairing your releases together is because so often you see a lot of wide receivers slide to the outside, and then what do? They slide, they're patient, they slow their tempo down, and then they take off, right? So maybe when you're not getting the ball as a wide receiver, you work this type of thing. Maybe you work it a bunch on game film where you slide and then you take off vertical to make a DB more like overreactive, I guess you could say, because now when you slide to the outside, he's seen this before, you throw this move to the outside, he's more likely to jump as he's expecting that outside move, but really we end up just running the slant. So all top tier guys are able to do this type of stuff, you guys. They're able to set up their releases, make it look the same to get that DB off his platform. So first thing that all 5-star wide receivers have in common, you guys, they're able to pair their releases together. Now, second thing, you guys, and this is going to be from former 5-star wide receiver here, Zach Branch, who now plays at USC, and this is how you guys, if you're a receiver who has speed and you're a high-level guy, but you are faced up against a DB who also has speed, who is also a high-level guy, there are certain things that you need to do to get separation, and that's what we're going to talk about next. But first, fellas, if you are a receiver or quarterback watching this and you would like to train with myself and my staff of coaches, we're going to be coming out to 15 different cities across the U.S. for 2-day-long QB and wide receiver training camp. So, guys, check out that very first link in the description below. If you guys are local to San Francisco, Orlando, Phoenix, Charlotte, Austin, Las Vegas, Seattle, Chicago, Newark, Birmingham, Houston, Boston, Columbus, Boise, or Los Angeles. You guys are coming out to all 15 cities, 2-day-long camps. So check out that very first link in the description below. Again, if you would like to sign up and get your spot. Last year, all of our camps, all 15 that we hosted, sold out very, very fast before the first of the year, and we had to turn away a lot of people. So guys, make sure you get your spots now. Our San Francisco camp only has 5 spots left. Orlando has about 10 to 12. Phoenix has about 15, and same with Charlotte. So I hope you guys can sign up. We'd love to see you there. Again, very first link in that description below. Let's get back to this video. So now let's look at this example here of Zach Branch using a great tempo hesitation skip to get that DB to slow his feet down, right? I think a lot of times, you get high-level wide receivers, and, in high school, it's easy, right? You're going up against DBs who maybe aren't as talented. Maybe they're not as fast. And it's very, very tempting to just, the ball is snapped and we just beat him with speed and just go run by him. But you need some more creativity than that. And I think that's something that a lot of 5-star guys, guys that play D1 Power 5 ball, they understand what it takes to get separation against a talented DB, whether it's going against DBs like that in camp environments like so, whether it's playing high-level competition in 7-on-7, whether it's going to different camps across the country, like I said before. So you have to understand that it's more than just your speed. You have to be able to use your speed. So he uses something called like a hesitation skip, which is where you essentially take 2 steps on a single foot. So you run up here and you see how he goes left, and then he takes off. And that little change in tempo, that double step where he says the left foot again, that's enough to get that DB to hesitate. And if we got a DB who's like the same speed as us, or maybe a little bit slower, but still very, very fast, all we need is a step. Because what we have to realize, you guys, is that DBs are playing backwards. Like anybody that was in just a foot race and somebody had to start backwards and you guys were about the same speed, the guy who didn't have to start backwards would win every single time. He has to open up his hips and run with us. So if we could use any type of change of tempo when we are facing a faster DB or a DB just as fast, that can get us space. So guys, that's something, another trait of a 5-star wide receiver is they understand how to use their speed and manipulate their speed. Now, next trait of a 5-star wide receiver would be the ability to react at the top of the route. So this wide receiver is going to be running a post route, right? And he's facing a DB who's lined up in like head-up press coverage. So if a DB is in head-up press and we have to run a post route, we obviously would like to take the inside release. We wouldn't want to take the outside release unless we have to, right? If he's inside shape press, not giving up the inside, okay, cool, let's give him a move and let's take the outside release. Now, our goal always against press coverage is going to be restacking the defender, right? Restacking the defender is when you get over the top of him. I get a lot of questions about this. You guys like, what does that mean? That is when you're at the top of the break and this DB is like trailing behind your hips. Now, sometimes you're going to get a DB who's maybe a little bit faster than us, maybe a little bit quicker than us. And we cannot be that guy that like, I can only run my routes one way. It's like if I get up to the top of the break and I stack them, I'll get open. But if I don't stack them, and then I'm just going to run a lazy ass route and just drift off into this thing. So what this wide receiver shows a great example of is, like I said, reacting at the top of the break. Things aren't going our way. We're not able to stack. What is he doing? He's leaning into him. He's using his size, using his body to his advantage. So when he does decide to break, he gets some separation. It's like a way to push off without actually pushing off. So guys, you could do this in a lot of different situations, right? Let's say, for example, he had to run a 10-yard out and he had this same head-up press. Obviously, I would love to give the guy a move inside, take the outside release, stack him, get him trailing behind me, give him a fake inside, and then run my out route. But if I can't, I would lean into him with the left side of my body. And then at the break point, I would almost kind of like push off. Use your body to push off. So you have to be able to react as a wide receiver, especially top of the break, because things may not always go our way or go exactly as planned, but we have to be able to react. Now, this is actually a poor example of a wide receiver rep right here, and I want to talk about this because I think it's important. And, you know, the five-star guys, and there's another trait of a five-star guy, is that when they're going up against higher competition, right? DBs who are going to be just as good as them, DBs who are just as fast, just as big, they understand that it's more than just their speed and their size, right? And more specifically, you're not going to be able to just run around people. And that's what I want to showcase with this, because watch what happens. He's running a fade route. It's going to be like a slot fade, right? And he has a DB who's inside shade, maybe about like 2 to 3 yards off. So what he should do is he should close the space with this DB, right? He should take the line of scrimmage that he's on and bring that line of scrimmage right to these DB's toes and then give him some type of move inside, because remember, when a DB is inside shade, his goal is not let us go to the inside. So if we close the space with him and give him a fake inside, then he's going to have to honor that. And if he honors that and takes a step there, I could get skinny, which means running hip to hip with him and then go get up into my slot fade. But what this receiver does is he just takes off and tries to run around. Because you have to understand, when a DB is inside shade, his goal, and you see where the ball lands over here, his goal is to not let us go to the inside, but also force us out of bounds. So if we just take off and try to run and just like speed release this situation, especially when there's 2 to 3 yards of space like this, that guy is going to get right into my hip and he is going to squeeze me to that sideline where the QB does not have any room. But guys, top tier wide receivers do not do this type of stuff when they're facing top tier talent. Now, you might see it sometimes in high school. You're going up against a scrub DB or DB's not quite on your level. Yeah, a receiver might be able to just run around him, right? But when you're facing top tier talent, you have to understand that the details matter. Let's close the space, let's attack his leverage, then let's go get up into my route rather than just taking off and running. Now, next trait here of a five-star wide receiver, you guys, is that when we are facing press coverage, five-star guys know how to sell their releases by stepping outside of a DB's frame. So this is that same wide receiver we looked at in the very first example, Brandon Inniss. And anytime that you have a DB and you're trying to make a move, you're trying to get him to move to the outside and you release inside or vice versa, you got to think of it like there are 3 driving lanes, okay? So we have the far right lane over here, we have the middle lane, and then we have the far left lane. From a receiver perspective, I know this is on the right side, however you guys want to think of it, but that's from a receiver perspective. So if I'm trying to get the DB to move here and I want to release over here, I need to actually step over there. A lot of wide receivers will do these fancy, quick-ass releases, and they're just stepping inside the DB's shoulder frame. It's almost like they're stepping down in a sense. Guys, you need to step, like I said, outside of his frame. So let's watch what happens when Inniss does that. So you see how far he steps and see how much we get that DB to turn his hips, and the DB actually falls down, right? So let's pay attention to it. When he throws this cut, look at where his body goes, right? You see how the foot is kind of like even with like his head almost goes with the foot. That keeps the foot inside of his frame. A lot of you might be thinking, well, if I step this far, coach, wouldn't I be off balance because my foot is too far and I'm like reaching? Not if your body is attached to your foot. What I tell my receivers all the time is that you want to try to get stacked. And getting stacked means your hip, your foot, and your head are on top of each other in a line, or we are pretty damn close, because that is what's going to help you step further. You can step as far as you want, and if you stay stacked, your foot will always be in a position where you could push off of that foot. That's why it's important that it's inside your frame, because we want to get separation, but so you also want to keep separation by driving off of my cuts. So this is a perfect example of stepping outside this DB's frame, guys. That's what we have to do if we want to get separation. Anytime I'm facing press coverage, I want him to move, let's step outside his frame, but let's make sure my head, my hip, and my foot go with each other. All right, so now this next example here is from a former five-star wide receiver, Jonte Cook. Now he's at the University of Texas, I believe, and he is going to be running a whip route. But what I want to get across to you guys is that these like top tier wide receivers, high recruited guys, they know how to make their routes look the exact same when it comes to a double move. And he's going to be running a whip, right? So that's double move. Now, what he doesn't do is he doesn't just take off and then run a whip. He runs this whip exactly like how he would run like a one-step slant or a quick slant off of this. And it comes down to his release. It's the little details that you have to pay attention to as a wide receiver. So you see like his jab to the outside and then he runs his whip route, right? Now, some of you might be saying, well, he should have just kept going. Yes, we can't change the route mid-play if we don't have that drawn up, right? So he gives this, it's not like he just takes off and runs, which he probably could do, put the brakes on, run the whip, right? Maybe he'll get separation, but maybe he won't. We want to make this DB think it's going to be, it looks exactly like a slant, because that's what's going to get him to overcommit and actually drive on the slant. It has to look the same, you guys. It can't be something different when you run a double move, and then when you run a single move, that's when you work your release. It has to be the exact same. That's how we manipulate DBs. And I'm not talking in a 7-on-7 environment like this. I'm talking in a real game environment. When you are playing high-level college football, these DBs are smart. Any level of college football, DBs are smart. They're going to watch film. They're going to study what you were doing. They're going to try to understand what releases he does for this route, what he does on this route. And you have to make routes look the same, guys, or else we're not going to be able to get separation. So he throws this jab outside, then he runs the whip. So that's what I want to get across to you guys. Don't change things just based on, the route that you're running, or if it's a different route, if it's a double move. Make things look the same. Be manipulative, okay? Now, this next example here, fellas, is going to be from Jordan Addison when he was at Pitt. And this is a great example of high-level wide receivers, 5-star wide receivers. What they have in common these days and what receiver coaches look for at a high level is how well you could get into your breaks, right? Breaks where you have to drop your hips. Can you get in and out of a 45 break like a curl, like a comeback, sometimes even a dig route where you have to drop your hips? How smooth are you on that? And smoothness is equated to being violent, if that makes sense. Because on every single route, what are we trying to make this DB think we're doing? We're trying to make him think that we were running a fade. So we give a quick jab inside, we work outside. I want him to turn his hips completely to the opposite end zone, and I want him to think I'm running deep. But the only way, and when you're selling vertical, we're obviously running with normal strides. We're not taking choppy steps, preparing for the break. We're not raising up, and we're running hard. It's not full speed, but we're running hard. So it's long strides, run hard, good body language. The only way I'm going to be able to stop, though, when doing that at the last possible second, at the break point, is by being violent with my hips. I think there is a string attached to your chin, and I pretend that we were going to take that string and somebody's pulling it as quickly as they can straight down to my knee. And when you guys can drop like that and sit into a chair with your lower body, because that's what the upper body should do, but the lower body should quote unquote sit into a chair. I tell guys all the time, pretend like you're playing musical chairs. Music stops, you got to drop as fast as you can. So it's musical chairs and the chin goes straight to your knee. And when you guys can do that and drop on a dime, that's how you're going to get out of your break smoother. And that's what a college coach is looking for, guys. Nowadays, coaches want guys who can run routes. Like, you look at it every single year. Look at the top tier schools that for wide receivers, like Alabama, Ohio State, like the U, Miami. The guys that they get are always dudes who can run routes very, very well. And that's what I think a lot of coaches are starting to look for. They're starting to look for wide receivers who can move like this because they understand what an asset it is to have a wide receiver who could separate versus man coverage or any type of coverage on those routes. Now, there's another example from Jonte Cook, former 5-star wide receiver that we broke down earlier in this video. And he is going to be using kind of like a skip into a rocker step. Now, this is one thing I want to get across to you guys, that, one-on-ones is one thing. But when you watch, and this is kind of a negative example too, but this is I wanted to show you guys this just so you don't like believe everything you see on social media, or think everything you see on social media or clips of one-on-ones is realistic, because it's not, right? So you watch him going into this route, and he does this little skip, and then he hits him with this like 1, 2, 3, and then he runs his post, right? I'm going to tell you guys this right now. This is not a game realistic move. Like in a game, you're not going to be able to skip mid-route and then go up a step, and then go 1, 2, 3 on your break. It just won't happen unless you are a backside route, unless you're a third read or a fourth read, and the QB is not looking at you first, and you can be more patient with your routes. But I don't want you guys to see this type of move and think that this is how you should run every single post, because this is a highly recruited receiver doing it. You have to understand, guys, that a lot of these, when you see all these videos, these 5-star dudes, like, they're still high school receivers. Like, they still make the same mistakes that every wide receiver will make at a high school level. They're still high school kids. So it's just, you don't want to believe everything you see on social media. When you're running routes, keep things efficient. The top tier guys, when they get to the next level, you'll never see this move on a Saturday in an actual game, right? And some of you might argue with me on that, but you won't. And it's just, you have to understand that there are times to do these things, maybe in one-on-ones, maybe when you're trying to be a little flashy. I don't recommend it. I recommend you should train, you should practice how you play, but just know that these types of things are not as realistic as you think in a live game scenario at these Power 5 or Power 4 schools.